A reading from the book of Genesis, chapter 30. When Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she envied her sister. She said to Jacob, "Give me children, or I shall die." Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, "Am I in the place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" Then she said, "Here is my servant Bilhah. Go in to her so that she may give birth on my behalf, that even I may have children through her." So she gave him her servant Bilhah as a wife, and Jacob went in to her. And Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, "God has judged me, and has also heard my voice and given me a son." Therefore she called his name Dan. Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, "With mighty wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister and have prevailed." So she called his name Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had ceased bearing children, she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Then Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son, and Leah said, "Good fortune has come." So she called his name Gad. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son, and Leah said, "Happy am I, for women have called me happy." So she called his name Asher. In the days of wheat harvest, Reuben went and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But she said to her, "Is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also?" Rachel said, "Then he may lie with you tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes." When Jacob came from the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "You must come in to me, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." So he lay with her that night, and God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Leah said, "God has given me my wages because I gave my servant to my husband." So she called his name Issachar. And Leah conceived again, and she bore Jacob a sixth son. Then Leah said, "God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will honor me because I have borne him six sons." So she called his name Zebulun. Afterward she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. She conceived and bore a son and said, "God has taken away my reproach." And she called his name Joseph, saying, "May the Lord add to me another son." As soon as Rachel had borne Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away that I may go to my own home and country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, that I may go, for you know the service that I have given you." But Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your sight, I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Name your wages, and I will give it." Jacob said to him, "You yourself know how I have served you, and how your livestock has fared with me. For you had little before I came, and it has increased abundantly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I turned. But now, when shall I provide for my own household also?" He said, "What shall I give you?" Jacob said, "You shall not give me anything. If you will do this for me, I will again pasture your flock and keep it. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from it every speckled and spotted sheep, and every black lamb, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and it shall be my wages. So my honesty will answer for me later, when you come to look into my wages with you. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats, and black among the lambs, if found with me, shall be counted stolen." Laban said, "Good, let it be as you have said." But that day Laban removed the male goats that were striped and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had white on it, and every lamb that was black, and put them in the charge of his sons. And he set a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob. And Jacob pastured the rest of Laban's flock. Then Jacob took fresh sticks of poplar and almond and plane trees, and peeled white streaks in them, exposing the white of the sticks. He set the sticks that he had peeled in front of the flocks in the troughs, that is, the watering places, where the flocks came to drink. And since they bred when they came to drink, the flocks bred in front of the sticks, and so the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted. And Jacob separated the lambs, and set the faces of the flocks toward the striped, and all the black in the flock of Laban. He put his own droves apart, and did not put them with Laban's flock. Whenever the stronger Whenever the stronger of the flock were breeding, Jacob would lay the sticks in the troughs before the eyes of the flock, that they might breed among the sticks. But for the feebler of the flock he would not lay them there, so the feebler would be Laban's and the stronger Jacob's. Thus the man increased greatly and had large flocks, female servants and male servants, and camels and donkeys. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So in this chapter, I see how lucky Jacob was. I mean, I guess you could say lucky, maybe because I'm just thinking about how he had several women in his life and they all gave him children. But obviously, his main wife, Rachel, was barren. God didn't allow her to have children. She was barren. So she felt reproached by God, and she thought giving her servant to Jacob, the first one was Bilhah, and asked Jacob to go into her that she may give birth on her behalf, so that she could have a child at least through her. That kind of reminds me of Abraham and his wife Sarah, and how she gave um, Hagar to Abraham so that he could go into her and have a son, and he did have had Ishmael. And now here I see kind of like history repeating itself through Jacob, Jacob's wife, that is Rachel, telling Jacob to go into her maidservant, in this case Bilhah, and Bilhah gave him a son, um, and what was it? It called him Dan, and then I think he had another one named Naphtali, and then he went into Leah's servants, his first wife, Zilpah, and had more sons. And then one day, Leah's son had mandrakes, and I don't know what mandrakes are, but Rachel wanted them so bad that she made a deal with her sister Leah, that if her son gave her the mandrakes, that she would allow Leah to sleep with have sex with Jacob, and so she did, and Jacob got her pregnant, and she conceived him had a fifth son for Jacob, um, named Issachar. And then Jacob went into her again, and then she had to give him um, another son, whom she called Zebulun. And then after that, she gave birth to him a daughter, and called her Dinah. So here I see Jacob just having sex with everybody. He was having sex with his wife Rachel, and then her maidservant, and then after her maidservant, with Leah's maidservants, and then with Leah, and having kids all over. And I mean, nowadays, if somebody were to have done that, it'd be frowned upon and looked at as a pig, or just a womanizer, or somebody who doesn't have any scruples. But I mean, this is Rachel, his wife, who was agreeing to him doing all this too. So I mean, culturally speaking, maybe it was a whole different ballgame back then. But the point is, Jacob had sex with all these women, and he had lots of kids with all these women. And it's pretty obvious that God was fulfilling his promise to multiply his ancestors, or I mean, his descendants, Abraham's descendants, through Jacob. Um, and then finally, God remembered Rachel, and here I am thinking about God, like, I don't want to say he was a punk because God is not a punk. He's good all the time, but he closed Rachel's room. He didn't allow her to have children. He didn't allow her to get pregnant, and she really wanted to get pregnant for so long. But finally, after all these kids were born from her older sister Leah and from her maidservant and Leah's maidservants, God finally remembered Rachel and opened her womb, and she finally conceived a son. And it said, God has taken away my reproach, and she called his name Joseph, saying, "May the Lord add to me another son." Um, I think that was interesting that, you know, Rachel's finally had a son and named him Joseph. And we all know that Jesus' foster father's name was Joseph too. Obviously, that's not the same person, but the name Joseph, I didn't know it meant God has taken away my reproach. And my wife and I, we have plans of having another child. My daughter's 3.5 years old now, but we put it on the hands of the Lord to see whether or not she gets pregnant. But at least now we're actually aiming toward that goal. Like that's something we're trying to do. It's not the opposite where we're not trying to get her pregnant. But now we're hoping that she does get pregnant. And we just started about a week ago, or this week actually. So we'll see how long it takes before my wife gets pregnant again. And when she does, I mean, I'll be happy too. Because before my wife and I got married, one thing we agreed upon was that she would give me at least 2 kids. And so far, we've only got Rosemary. And I'd love to have a little boy. But if I have another girl, I'd be just as happy. I wouldn't be upset about it. And yeah, so I'll be in prayer about that. And definitely just leaving it in God's hands. He knows what's best. And now, toward the end of the chapter, we see how Jacob went to Rachel's father Laban, his father-in-law, and said he wanted to split ways. He wanted to go back to his own country with all his wife, his children, and all his possessions. And uh, Laban didn't want him to because he realized that God had blessed him through Jacob's presence there. So Jacob agreed to stay with him as long as he gave him uh, the spotted and speckled uh, flocks of the sheep and goats or whatever it was he was tending as a shepherd. And he was very crafty too. So I guess he got back at Laban for deceiving him with Leah, and now he found ways of getting all the choicest, strongest, most healthiest goats and lambs and sheep by having them mate in areas where they would um, result as speckled. Honestly, I can't really know exactly this whole procedure that Jacob did to have the flocks give spotted and striped and speckled offspring, but Jacob knew, and he fooled his own father-in-law. I guess you could say he got even because now all the feebler ones, all the weaker ones that didn't have stripes or speckles were his father-in-laws, and all the numerous, strong, and healthy flocks and animals and cattle or whatever he had were his personally. Where verse 43, the last verse of the chapter, he says, "Thus the man increased greatly and had large flocks, female servants and male servants, and camels and donkeys." So we see how God blessed Jacob's wealth tremendously at the end of this chapter. And God bless our wealth tremendously too. In Jesus' name, amen.